A my v Klubovke pokračujeme aj ďalej. Ešte sa v rámci diania Klubovky dnes spojíme aj s nemeckou dizajnérkou, architektkou Annou Heringer. Kým sa ale teda pripraví jej prezentácia, tak vám radi predstavíme aj to, čo robí ďalší z našich partnerov Klubovky, spoločnosť Laufen. Ivan Šimovič je obchodný manažer Laufen. Dobrý večer, vítajte.
Dobrý večer, krásny večer.
Sme radi, že ste s nami v Klubovke, v tomto skvelom online štúdiu. Aký máte deň za sebou a aký máte vzťah ku Klubovke?
Tak, deň je úžasný, bolo nádherné počasie, dneska som si ho užil, vlastne až teraz na večer som dobehol akože pracovať. A ku Klubovke my máme veľmi srdečný vzťah a dá sa povedať už dosť historický, myslím, tu na. Nechcem povedať, že sme boli medzi prvými, ale boli sme prví úplne a boli sme úplne pri prvej Klubovke ako spoločnosť Laufen.
Ja len doplním, že Tatiana Kolárova, teda s ktorou som sa už rozprával, zakladateľka Klubovky, prikyvuje, že áno, že ste tak zásadná firma, ktorá pomáhala vlastne budovať túto značku, ktorá už teda takmer 20 rokov existuje.
Áno, niekedy sa už zle ráta potom, lebo človek zistí, že už teda má niečo za sebou. Takže áno, sme od prapočiatku úplne pri Klubovke a sme strašne radi a strašne si to vždy užívame.
Aj vďaka vám sa dejú takéto fantastické veci v Klubovke. Sme zvedaví aj na vaše novinky, tak poďme sa teda do firmy Laufen pozrieť.
Takže ešte raz krásny večer prajem. Dúfam, že ste si užili video z našej fabriky, kde sme trošku priblížili, jak sa tam zabávame. A teraz by som rád využil krátky čas niečo o Laufene povedať. Laufen je, dá sa povedať, historicky tiež stará firma. Naše obdobie začalo už v roku 1892. Čo sa týka švajčiarskej výroby Laufen, takže už teda budúci rok budeme oslavovať nejaké 130. výročie, ale napriek tomu to nie je naša najstaršia fabrika. Máme ešte staršiu, a to dokonca z blízkej Českej republiky, kde sme dokonca začali výrobu už v roku 1878. A všetky tieto úžasné veci spájame dohromady a Laufen vytvára firmu, kde nám veľmi záleží na dizajne, na kvalite a na technológii a užitkovosti. To všetko sa premieta do našich produktov a nášho života s nimi. Verím, že žijeme s nimi už dlho a každý už pozná tieto produkty. Toto je fotka, jak Laufen začínal. Zhodou na okolnosti názov Laufen nesie po dedine Laufen, z ktorej Laufen v Švajčiarsku pochádza a odkiaľ vykročili všetky tieto úžasné príbehy. A ja chcem niektoré tie príbehy iba ukázať a povedať o jednom špeciálnom, jak nás tie príbehy spájajú s architektmi a dizajnérmi, s ktorými pracujeme a ktorí posunuli náš svet o mnoho ďalej, ako je teraz. Čo sa týka Laufenu, tak pre zaujímavosť, jedna z našich úžasných výtvorov a noviniek bol závesný klozet, ktorý teraz už všade existuje, ale v 64. sme si na ním veľmi lámali hlavu. Ďalší obrovská invencia, ktorú sme dali svetu ako spoločnosť, bolo tlakové liatie. Vlastne úplne nový spôsob výroby sanitárnej keramiky, ktorý dovtedy neexistoval a ten priemyselný produkt išiel o mnoho ďalej. Prepojenie s architektmi a dizajnérmi, medzi prvými bolo Porsche. Veci ako stojace umývadlo spolu s dizajnérom Giovannonim zo štúdia Il Bagno Alesi, ktoré tiež posunulo ten vývoj ďalej a produkty, ktoré sú. Spojenie s ďalšími historickými producentmi zo Švajčiarska, ale aj z celého sveta, nás posunul až k jednej z veľkých noviniek, a to je Safír keramík. Safír keramík je úplne nový typ keramiky, ktorý sme vyvinuli my, Laufen, v roku 2013. A tento produkt nám otvoril úplne nové dimenzie práce s keramikou, ktorá doteraz nebola možná. Otvorili priestor pre spoluprácu s architektmi a dizajnérmi, ktorým sme otvorili úplne iné možnosti, jak sa dá ten svet modelovať a aj ten kúpeľňový svet. A v čom je to tak špecifické? Ide hlavne o to, že v jednoduchosti s použitím z korundu sa vytvorila keramika, ktorá je v úplne iných možnostiach, čo sa týka hrany, tenkosti, tvrdosti, ale zároveň možné sa s nimi vytvárať vzory a dekory, ktoré bežne pri bežnej keramike sa nedali. Tým, že sme túto novinku predstavili, tak sa začali spájať príbehy s dizajnérmi, s ktorými sme dovtedy ani nemysleli, že by sa niekedy naša spoločnosť mohla spojiť. A to je to krásne pripojenie, že prídete s myšlienkou a oni ju posunú ďalej. A jedna z tých myšlienok bola práve, jak to uviesť na trh. Takže my sme prišli s technológiou, my sme pozvali architektov, dizajnerov, urobil sa workshop a povedali sme im, urobte si s tým, čo chcete. My chceme vidieť, čo tento materiál dokáže. A tam sa začala tá spolupráca s množstvom architektov, tým, že neboli viazaní žiadnymi konvenčnými vecami, presne toto po vás chceme, ale vy nám ukážte, čo sa z toho dá urobiť. A z týchto krásnych workshopov vznikla spolupráca napríklad s Adriánom Dimitriadisom, s ktorým sa už pracovalo, ale posunul svoje výrobky do novej sféry, kde nemohol byť. Nadviazala sa úplne nová spolupráca s Konstantínom Grčičom, ktorý prišiel presne na tento workshop. Porobil úžasné veci a niektoré tie veci nie len, že sa dali ďalej tvoriť, ale prešli úplne do života a sú v ponuke. Nové meno, ktoré pre nás nebolo možné osloviť dovtedy, ale vďaka novým myšlienkam, ktoré máme, je Toan Nguyen, ktorý presne z tohoto workshopu vzýšla úplne nová séria. Opätovne sa to s ním prepojilo a my sme strašne radi, že sme mu dali možnosť vstúpiť do sveta kúpeľní. Palomba krásne prepojenie švajčiarskej precíznosti a južanského dizajnu. Spolupracoval s nami a tú spoluprácu dotiahol tak, že pomocou neho sme prepojili obrovské spoločnosti, ako je Kartel a Laufen a vytvorili sme novú sériu Kartel by Laufen. Patricia Urquiola, jedna z najznámejších španielských dizajnerov, videla, o čom je Laufen. My sme ju poprosili, aby nám pomohla navrhnúť v Madride náš showroom, priestor v jednej historickej vile z roku 1900, ktorá bola chránená. Naozaj tie zásahy by mohli byť iba minimalistické. A pri tej práci to skončilo tým, že vytvorila s nami celú novú sériu Sonar. A posledné veľké meno Marcel Wanders. A s týmto dizajnerom sme sa stretli ako spoločnosť pri kreovaní hotelu Mondriana v Dohe, kde využil naše produkty, zoznámil sa s našou spoločnosťou, zoznámil sa s technológiami a vyšlo z toho úplne nový set The New Classic, ktorý zase Marcel Wanders nám pomohol ďalej posunúť naše technologické schopnosti a jeho dizajnerské umenie a vytvoriť krásny priestor na to, aby sme mohli urobiť aj takú zvláštnu miestnosť, ako je kúpeľňa, nádhernou a dokonalou a verím, že úžasnou pre všetkých ľudí. Ďakujem za pozornosť.
My ďakujeme veľmi pekne. Ivan Šimovič je obchodný manažer Laufen. Ďakujeme najmä za Bovkou a teda, že sa uvidíme aj o rok.
Ďakujeme pekne.
Ďakujeme za prezentáciu. No a v Klubovke zostávame a posúvame sa k ďalšej hostke. Je sobota, Dni architektúry a dizajnu a filmu a Klubovka sa zameriavajú práve na dizajn. No a ešte si dnes pozrieme dva filmy, spojíme sa aj s autorskou dvojicou týchto snímok, ale predtým ešte jedna mimoriadna prednáška venovaná dizajnu. Poslednou takou oficiálnou veľkou hostkou dnešného večera, ktorá prichádza do Klubovky, je nemecká architektka a dizajnérka Anna Heringer. A bude to krásne rozprávanie, pretože Anna je tvorkyňou a propagátorkou udržateľnej architektúry. Hlavnou ideou jej tvorby je navrhovať stavby z existujúcich, ľahko dostupných zdrojov danej krajiny a vytvoriť architektúru, ktorá nie je závislá od externých systémov. Udržateľnosť je pre ňu synonymom krásy. Budova, ktorá je harmonická v dizajne, štruktúre, technike a v použití materiálov, ako aj s polohou, prostredím, používateľom a sociálno-kultúrnym kontextom. To je pre ňu to, čo definuje udržateľnú a estetickú hodnotu architektúry, ale hovoriť viac už bude sama v mimoriadne pútavej prezentácii. Anna Heringer je s nami. Now we are connected with Anna Heringer. Anna, are you with us? Can you hear me, Anna? Good evening. We cannot hear you.
You cannot hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you very much. Guten Abend.
Good evening, Bratislava.
Thank you very much. We are enjoying your presentation. We will enjoy it. And thank you for joining us. If you are prepared, if you are ready,
Yes.
You can start. We are looking forward to hearing your talk.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sorry that this is online, but my thoughts are with you now in Bratislava. Architecture to me is a tool to improve lives. And unfortunately, also the opposite is true. Architecture can destroy. But I'm an idealist. I really strongly believe that we human beings can do better than now. And architecture is a powerful tool for change. We can build a building, and at the same time, we can build up a community. And we can do this in harmony with nature, with our planet. All around us and just below our feet are fantastic natural building resources, materials. And all we need is our creativity to see those resources and our sensitivity to see those resources and our creativity to use them. And when we look at this picture, this is the city of Shibam in Yemen, and that was built 500 years ago. It's built purely out of the soil, out of the earth. And what was possible that long ago, building skyscrapers just out of the dirt must be possible today as well, with all the technological know-how that we have and all the tools and information that we got. So I'm very much in favor of, you know, appreciation of the resources that we find just all around us, and to build beautiful cities and villages, homes and workspaces. This picture shows a study trip with students from Eth Zurich. It was the end of October and it was really cold. It was in the mountains in Vorarlberg in West Austria, and there was still frost on the floor, on the ground at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I surprised the group with the fact that there was no hut or no hostel or any sort of accommodation booked for the night. And it was the challenge, or, you know, the task for each future architect to build their own shelter with whatever they could find. And it was obviously not very luxurious. It was really cold also for myself. I also did the same thing. And it was a great learning experience that there are a lot of resources given by nature for free. And I found myself in a similar situation when I was 19 years old. I went to a remote Bangladeshi village called Rudapur with the aim, you know, to understand more about life, more about development work, and how to pursue happiness in a way with, you know, with simple means. And I had great teachers, the NGO Deepshika, it's a Bangladeshi NGO for rural development. And what I learned from them, that the most effective strategy for resilience and for development is really to cherish, to value the resources you have, and to make the best out of them by using your own hands and craftsmanship. And this is what I tried to translate into architecture 7 years later. And in terms of materials, I didn't have to look far. They were right under my feet: the mud, the bamboo, and of course, as an energy source, the water buffaloes, cows, and also human energy, people. When we think of alternative energies, we always think of solar, of wind, and so on. But the human energy is also a source of energy, and it's a growing source of energy. And furthermore, if we don't use this energy, we also create a social problem, because everyone wants to be needed and wants to do a meaningful work. So the school looked like this after 6 months of construction. It was my diploma work at the University of Arts in Linz. And for the realization, I had a partner, Eike Roswag, a Berlin-based architect. And what you see, the ground floor is really load-bearing earthen walls with no cement added, only in the foundation. And then a bamboo floor that kind of brings the lightness in. So you have the very protected, intimate atmosphere that even is elevated through this kind of holes that you see in the back wall. You come into the cave area, and I was just trying to remember the spaces that I loved when I was a kid. And I think, you know, when we reduce our human needs and our human notions to the most archaic needs and patterns, we come to, you know, very similar feelings, I think, all around the world. I don't think that a girl from Bavaria feels so much different than a girl in Bangladesh, in fact. So this is kind of this very protected, warmth-like feeling. And it also gives space for kids, you know, to retreat sometimes. Sometimes you're sad, you know, sometimes you can't stand the group. So you want to retreat, but you still are connected. You're never off, and, you know, never kind of excluded, but you still have a connection to both sides, but still you feel kind of protected by this kind of earthen cave or earthen wall. And the opposite is kind of a tree house. I think everyone can relate also to this spaces, you know, having the overview, getting the lightness in, and kind of also the rhythmic through the shades and the colors. So this is the top floor classroom, and the children all signed with the names on the doors, and they rightfully did so because they also helped building the school. And of course, this is not possible with every building material, because some materials are toxic. For some materials, you need really sophisticated tools that can harm. But with the mud, you can also really do it just by using your hands. And that makes it such an inclusive material. So in the afternoon, the future students would come and help building their own school. And of course, this was a work that they could physically do without effort, but it was still a needed work. So they felt very much needed and useful. And you can probably all relate to that emotions when you stand in front of that school as a young girl or as a young boy or an illiterate day laborer who had never had the chance to go to school in his life. So standing after 6 months of construction in front of that school building and knowing you built this thing with only using your hands, your muscles, and the dirt beneath your feet, that gives just such an enormous boost in confidence in your own potentials, in the group, in the team, in the community, and also in the local materials like bamboo and mud that have a very low image in this more or less all around the world, unfortunately. So mud walls are considered to be non-durable at all. In fact, mud walls can stand for hundreds of years if certain rules are respected. And one of the most important rules is a good foundation that protects the walls from the groundwater, and a good roof that protects the walls from the top. And the walls, you know, there is harsh monsoon rains horizontally hitting the walls, and the walls are standing strong since 2005. Yeah, so for me, earth is the champion actually of sustainable building materials, because it's the only material you can take from the ground. You can recycle it as often as you want without any loss of quality, without downcycling, which is hardly any material that can do that. And you can return it to the ground it came from and plant a garden on top of it. So it doesn't leave any wounds or scars. And that's a wonderful thing, because we're leaving way too many scars on our planet. In terms of economic sustainability, it was wonderful to observe that, you know, every evening the workers would get their salary, the daily wages, and so part of the building budget. And then together we went by bicycle to the next local market, and I could see how they spent their share of building budget, and it was invested into the vegetables from the neighbors, or, you know, the farmers, the local farmers, or into a new blouse by the local tailor, or getting a new haircut, bicycle repaired. So the building or the budget for this structure had not just a school building as a result, but also it was a catalyst for local development. And that made me especially happy, because if I had built that school in concrete and steel, this money would have been lost for those communities and for those people. So for me, when it comes to economic sustainability, it's never just a question, you know, low cost. For me, the main question is who gets the profit? You know, and sometimes it's super cheap to build with concrete, but you know, it would be much more helpful to hire someone, a craftsman, to build this wall out of, you know, a material that doesn't need any CO2. So, you know, the question who gets the profit is really essential. And when I'm ending my life as an architect and summing up all the building budget that went through my hands, which probably will end up into millions, so I want to be able to tell myself that real people like craftsmen and women had got the profit of this budget, and not just big industries. So for me, the underlying approach of all the projects is always local materials plus local energy sources, especially human energy and global knowledge, because I believe knowledge should be accessible everywhere, anytime in this world. The same kind of underlying approach I have also for my second passion, besides architecture, is textiles. And I do this work, the textile work, not as a fashion designer or artist, but I do it as an architect, because I see how the textile sector and the garment sector is influencing the settlement patterns and the lives of so many people in Bangladesh. It's not city planners, urban planners, or any source of planners who have the influence to shape the settlement patterns. It's definitely really the industry, the call of money in a way, the globalization, and the way we consume our clothes, or the way we shop. So a lot of people in the rural areas in Bangladesh, they are dragged, into a few certain textile hubs, Chittagong, Dhaka, and there are just too many people to provide really humane living conditions. So in the rural areas, even if you don't have much money, you have the ability to build your own house with the natural resources you find. The children have all a fantastic playground, which is the entire village. That is a good air to breathe, not unlike the big cities. And even the care for the elderly people, you know, there is just such a big bond, and the social network is so strong that the women are just free to move around because they know everyone. While in the cities, they don't know anyone, so they are hardly, you know, cannot move outside. You can have your cattle, you can have your goats and your little house garden, and all this independence you lose when you're working in the factories. The reason why the women are going there is because there is not enough land in the rural areas to feed all these people. Because of course the scarcity of land is really massive in Bangladesh because of the high density of population there. So they need a second leg to stand on, a second economic balance, and there is no other job opportunities usually in the rural areas. So they end up following the more secure source of income, and this is the garment sector. So instead, I wanted to do something against this rural to urban migration, and I felt that with architecture, I met my limits. I need to change the tool. That's why I decided that I have to go into the textiles and design a product that can be produced completely decentralized, not following any fashion season, and can be done by the women even if there's no electricity. And again, just like in architecture, where I'm looking at the local resources and the unique, also the unique identity of a place, I just looked at this beautiful textile culture that Bangladesh has, which is like the sari tradition and making out of used saris blankets. And people sleep on those blankets, and then they unfold the most vibrant surfaces. You know, they're peeling off layer by layer, and the whole family history is kind of embedded in these layers. So when those blankets are close to be completely torn, the families are bringing it to our little workshop where they get into exchanging new saris, and then we're producing textiles for our European market. So now normally the case is that we let our t-shirts and fashion get produced in Bangladesh under difficult situations. And then, you know, in Germany, I don't know the numbers in your country, but in Germany, one person buys 60 pieces of clothes. It's just unbelievable. I mean, 365 days a year, so how many times can you really wear those things? So they often end up, like after 3, 4, 5 times of wearing, they're ending up in the trash, and then they're carried to the African market, where they also destroy the work of local carpenters. And we wanted to turn the whole thing upside down. We wanted to bring the old clothes from Bangladesh to the European market and show that a new and better lifestyle is not related to always demanding for and craving for new resources, but also taking the old, the used ones, give it a second, a third, a fourth life. And, you know, just by adding creativity and craftsmanship and design. We also started to document our own building projects on these blankets. And this is one of my favorites. It shows it shows the map of Rudapur, the village where I was working since a long time. And what you see when you look a bit more close, all these blue dots that you can see are the excavation sites of the mud houses. So they're filled, of course, then with water. They turn into fishing ponds that add to the nutrition. Then all these dark green spots are the bamboo plantations, you know, they use also for building their houses. And of course, then all the house gardens and the rice field where the food is coming from is just all around the settlement. So the material circles are really, really small and closed, and that makes these places so incredibly sustainable that we can only learn from those places. So we started working with the women and thought, they get just a piece of clothes and they can take it home and work whenever they feel free to do it, taking care of the children at the same time. But then we figured out that the women so much want a space, a studio where they can meet and can tell now, their husbands, we're going to work, don't bother us, we are working women and not just housewives. And they just said, hey, Anna, we want a space to work, a good one. So then I got approached by DNJ Deepshika and a foundation from Hong Kong, and they planned to erect a structure for people with disabilities, a therapy center. And we discussed and we said, okay, we combine this center for people with disabilities with a workshop for the women, for Dipty textiles. And unlike the first buildings that are built in Rudapur that were all straight and rectangular boxes, this building is dancing because I wanted to show it's good kind of to break the mold and not just follow the norm, and to celebrate diversity, because it's beautiful that we as human beings are also not just following a norm, that we are diverse, that we are different. And it's something to celebrate, and it's something beautiful. So this is what this building wants to kind of radiate. That's the elevation. This is how it is built. And when you approach the building, the first thing you see is a ramp that leads all around the building. It's the only ramp in that area. And of course, the first question of all the visitors that are coming to see this building is, why is there a ramp? And then you're immediately starting the discussions on inclusion and why it is important, to have a universal access and not just a limited access. And that's the powerful thing with architecture, that it can really transmit philosophies. The therapy rooms on the ground floor, the caves underneath, the ramp and the veranda, and the workspace of the women of Dipty textiles. You see actually the same thing that is hanging here now on my back. Yeah, 7 times 7 billion. In the meanwhile, it's 7.9 billion. It's for me a very important thing. Whenever I'm designing, I'm trying to keep this in my mind. What would be if my decision was pursued by anyone on this planet? How would the world look like if ever anyone would just decide to design and to build as me? And the world is not changing with one big decision. The world is changing with the everyday small decisions that we take. Are we taking this paint now, this glue now, this concrete, this steel, or are we going to try it in a natural way? And maybe it's just 1 liter of paint. But still, if everyone would do this on this planet, our groundwater would be a disaster. So it's, just because we have the ability to go and buy those things doesn't mean that we have the liberty and the freedom to do that and the right to do so. So I think we all really should have in mind, that our actions to multiply it by the world's population and check how would our planet look like? Would the resources be exploited? Would it be a just society? And those are the thoughts that I'm having in mind when I'm designing. So the first building that I did in Europe was inspired by those very basic building structures or building technique called tabur that is in many parts of the world happening. It's just taking the wet clay and shaping it with your own hands. And we did this in the context of Austria. It was a project together with Martin Rauch. And we were invited to do design an atrium space in a company Omicron, where a lot of high-tech freaks are working. And we wanted to give them just the opposite, a very archaic enclosed space where they can, retreat and also connect with their inner self and get calm, get focused again. Yeah, a more meditative atmosphere. And of course, then in the outside, also a more communicative. And so we tried the same technique that I just said before, just in our European system. And aesthetic-wise, it completely worked. People could really relate to this spaces. These are the niches for the power naps. And then that's kind of the warmth-like space in the ground where you can listen to music or, have a calm conversation with friends, an intense one. And for me, the nice thing was that people really liked those spaces, and it was absolutely possible to do it. But it's so much more expensive to build in that way in Austria than it is in Africa or in Asia somewhere. And then for me, the question was, but hey, this is not the problem of the mud. The mud is given by nature for free. So it's a problem of our economic system that we have high taxes on human energy and craftsmanship, but very low taxes on CO2, on non-renewable energy sources. So this is a problem that we have to face, that we have to change. The good news is that our economic system is not a force of nature. It's man-made. So we can change it. So along with the project in Omicron in Austria, I also was invited to design hostels, youth hostels for a small village called Baoxi in China. And the aim of this project, of this bamboo biennale, where they invited 12 international architects, was to show that you can build with an old material still in a contemporary way. And that it's not a matter how old a material is, it's a matter of our creative ability to use it today so that it meets the needs and the aspiration of our current society. So the idea was to use the local bamboo, but also to use the local stones and the local earth. So in the middle is a core out of stones and out of rammed earth, and attached are the sleeping concons of the boys and the girls, so like tents more or less. And in the night they would gloom like Chinese lampshades, and all around a very expressive structure of open bamboo, like baskets in a way, like basket weaving. And I was really astonished how well they were in executing this basket weaving. And this is how it looks from the inside. So we have stone, we have rammed earth. And at the same time, you have a lot of cities that look like this. They have the most fantastic natural building materials, and all these people that are living now in these concrete blocks have been living in houses made out of natural building materials before. So between 2011 and 2013, China consumed more concrete or more cement than the United States in the past century. So it's just an enormous amount of consumption that is not just happening in China, it happens globally. It's a global trend. It's just happened in a very short time in China, but it's happening all over the world. And of course, it also happened in Europe before. And this is what we cannot afford in future anymore. We need alternatives. And such an alternative could be timber, could be fibers, natural fibers, could be earth. Another project I'm currently working on is the Campus St. Michael in Traunstein in Bavaria. It's a project of the Catholic Church of Dioceses Munich-Freising. And I'm always designing on large clay models. And this is going to be a center for sustainability, where lots of organizations dealing with social or environmental responsibility and sustainability are co-working in a way. And also this is going to be an earthen structure, and attached also a boarding school for in timber structure. So here you see the plans, and it's quite a massive structure. And of course, this is not possible, with just lots of craftsmanship, without completely low tech, without electricity on site as we had it in Bangladesh. You need some more high-tech tools to do this. And there are techniques to use. So for example, prefabrication developed by my colleague Martin Rauch in Austria. So in the background, you see kind of a big machine that rams a whole long wall out of out of rammed earth. And then this wall is cut into several pieces. And then on the side, it's just the joints are sprayed with water. And then the same material mix, the same earth gets in the joints. And then it looks completely like a monolithic structure again. So this was, for example, this looked like this before. So it's also existing out of different elements. And that's the beautiful thing, because it's non-stabilized. There's no cement added. You can just, make it wet, put the same material in, and it will look as if it was never divided before. And this is a building I designed also together with Martin Rauch. We just won the European Bauhaus Award for that, and we're very grateful for that from the European Commission. And this is a center for healing. It's an Ayurveda health center in Germany, in Rosenheim. And the rooms are relatively small. They're about 15 square meters, and you stay there for about 2 weeks. So it's relatively small. But we made sure that because of the choice of the materials and the intense craftsmanship. So you see the rammed earth walls, you see mud also on the ground. It's mud casein, a layer also on the furniture. It's wood with mud casein on top, and then a lot of mud plasterings that are on the walls as well, on the other walls. So because of the high intensity of craftsmanship and also this really natural, sensitive materials, you don't feel the smallness. And I think that's a very important thing. We always think, we want to have large living spaces. And we always think that the quantity makes the difference, but actually it's the quality that makes the difference. With a good design and good materials that you actually want to touch, where you feel embraced and where you feel well. You don't need lots of square meters to feel good and to feel really, at home and embraced. So I think this is something we also need to learn, that we reduce the need of square meters. The building is a load-bearing timber structure. It's also very close to or in the midst of alluvial forest. So the facade is made out of woven willows by my cousin Annou Heringer. And the building also kind of nestles in, it's not a straight wall. It kind of blends in a bit in the environment there. Another project, a birth room, together with Anka Dir, Martin Rauch, and Sabrina Sommer. It was the initiative in Austria, in the Vorarlberg, in the Bregenzer forest. There is a women's museum that celebrated 30 years of the anniversary, and they did an exhibition on the topic of birth, of giving birth. And interestingly, that's a topic that every person on this planet is related to and has, of course, it's important for everyone, but still there are no spaces for it. Not really. We have spaces for everything, but not for giving birth. Yes, you can do it at home, between the kitchen and the sofa and whatever, and the children and everything, or you can go to hospital. It's more or less the options that you have. But just imagine you're a baby, you're in your mother's womb, everything is dark, it's very closed, you're embraced, it's warm, and then you get out of the swamp, and then in the hospital come in this super bright, shiny white light. This is absolutely a shock. It's a complete shock for the baby, and also for the mother. It's not relaxing at all. Mother needs to be relaxed when she's giving birth, and the best is when she can completely let go. And we wanted to create a space that really gives that harmony, and we thought also earth is really a wonderful material, because it's an element that humankind grew up with. It's not just a building material, it's an element. And it's Mother Earth, or after all. So we did it with a lot of adobe bricks that we shaped. And then, of course, in Vorarlberg in Austria, it's raining a lot, so we had to cover the structure. And the tradition there is to use this kind of wooden shingles. And here you see the belly of the highly dew structure already. So we covered it with all shades of red. And then in front of it, you have a small garden out of healing plants, especially for women. And it's a space that is used now for workshops also on the topic, on female topics mainly. And I'm sorry, I think I don't have pictures from the inside, but it's a very, it's a very intimate space inside. And of course, in best scenario, this kind of space would be attached to a hospital, and to have the choice, in terms of if there's an emergency. But for this prototype, we choose a spot that is really having a beautiful place in the mountains. So from the mountains in Austria to Ghana, this is a master plan, or the task that I got was to design an educational center and campus for Don Bosco. And on this side is the master plan, on the left side is the master plan I got from Ghana. So, and this is kind of how they think an education campus, a school campus should look like. And this is the heritage that we brought from Europe in all these countries. It's implemented so many times, and it's really sad, because when you look at the right side, this is the reality. You have a diversity of materials and shapes and such a rhythmic kind of organism, and this kind of culture is all lost if we are, it's what we just transported in so many decades of missionary times, of colonialism, and this is not the right way, to just, and then along with that kind of grit is also coming the use of materials, because of course they would not have been built in natural and local and vernacular building materials, but of course with cement bricks, with fire bricks and so on. So there's a huge image change, because people were always thinking, when educated and rich people are building with those building materials, they must be much better than what we have. And this is a really a very problematic view. So I literally took this master plan and completely reshaped it, transformed it, and with having the spaces, the traditional vernacular spaces in my mind and the atmosphere, and trying to bring those cultural richness into this plan. So you have the various school buildings, classroom buildings, and then hostels for the students to stay, and also the teacher and the guests to stay, and then of course a lot of land for agriculture. And this is how I'm designing. So from the master plan scale, I go to a 1:50 model, or 1:100, depends on the building. And then it goes to the site where it gets implemented 1:1. This is Katharina Kohlroser. I'm having only women working at the moment in my office, and she's doing a wonderful job on the site. Yeah, I strongly believe in less concrete, more earth. And the last building or project I want to share with you is the altar in Worms. It's a cathedral in Germany that had the 1,000-year-old celebration or birthday. And the background of this beautiful cathedral is done by a very famous sculptor and architect called Balthasar Neumann. And there was only a temporary altar for a very long time, and every priest that was there always kind of inherited this task of putting a permanent structure to the next one, because everyone was afraid to take the wrong decision. But for the 1,000-year-old birthday, they needed one, or they said, okay, now we have to shift from a temporary solution into a permanent one. And they made a competition. And then in the final competition, in the final round were two different approaches. And one was, it was designed very beautifully, very sculptural, altar made out of steel that would have been brought in. And we said, we're not bringing the ready-made object. We are bringing the tools, we are bringing the earth, the material, and then the community gets together to ramp or to fabricate the table, the altar, where you celebrate the communion afterwards. And that is something that I learned from working in developing countries, that You know, you build a building, but also you have the chance through a good, well-designed building process to also really shape the community and strengthen the community. And for me, that's very important. You know, the process is just as important as the outcome. So we turned the cathedral into a construction site for about 5 days, and really everyone joined. You had, you know, the choir that normally sings in the churches ramming. You had, you know, nuns from India that are there since a very long time, and they kind of laid in some Indian soil. They were crying, and you could see how emotional this material is. And of course, so many people were coming, Dominican monks that were singing in Latin while they were ramming. And then, you know, just from the community, elderly people. Or of course, then we had a lot of heritage items went in, you know, the ones as a very rich heritage. So from the Roman Empire, they got some old stones in. From the neighboring cathedral, they also brought in, from Speyer, they brought in some elements. And then people started to bring more and more also personal things, like, you know, necklaces, or the old songbook of the old priest, or, you know, special letters, the best wine from the region. And the children also came to help, you know, mixing the soil and ramming the earth by stomping. And then the moment came when the shuttering was removed, and it was such a rich moment, because normally, you know, you think, you know, that's the most important thing when you finally see the result of the work, but the community was already so grown within these few days. And one of the women said, you know, normally we are not that harmonious, we fight like anything. But here we just knew we had to stick together to manage that, because it was quite a hard work to ram the thing. It was not just leaving a fingerprint participation, sort of. You really had to work physically quite hard. And then you handed over the rammer to the next person when you were exhausted. And that's kind of what's missing. We, you know, in former times, communities got together to build a cathedral, a church, a small temple, mosque, whatever, or the house of the mayor, school building, and that needed a joint effort. And we don't have this anymore. And I think this is what we're lacking. And we should really design our building processes as such that really people can actively participate again. And you can see on the faces, you know, we couldn't even, you know, say goodbye to this thing anymore. We had to touch it and all the time. And that's the final result of this altar. And for me, it's very symbolic. You know, in the background, you have all this gold and these precious materials. And that's, I think, reflects quite a lot what we have in society. We are not lacking of materials. We have a lot. But what we are lacking is good relationships and meaning. And I also believe that, you know, the most precious material is not gold, because gold cannot give us food, it cannot house us, give us habitat, but earth can. So we really have to take care of this beautiful earth that we have and of this planet, because we have to hand it over to the future generations. Form follows what? I think form follows function is so narrow. It just doesn't fit anymore. We have to be much more complex and much more wider and holistic. And to me, you know, I think we have plenty of good-looking buildings all around, but what we really need is meaningful architecture, and really beautiful one. Of course, the question is, what is beautiful one? Now, what is beauty? But for me, beauty is really a formal expression of love. And when we do things out of love towards the other, towards the planet, we also automatically do it sustainable. So for me, it would be form follows love. Thank you.
Ďakujeme pekne. Thank you, Annou Heringer. We are here, we are listening. We enjoyed your presentation. Thank you very much. That was very inspiring. Anna, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm wondering what's now the procedure. Is there questions or...
No, we have no questions. Everything was clear. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Ďakujeme veľmi pekne. Annou Heringer bola s nami dnes na Dňoch architektúry a dizajnu v Clubovke.